Mr. President,
The senator from Utah is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the cloture motion with respect to the House message be withdrawn, and the only motions and amendments in order to the House message to accompany H.R. 4366 be the following: Haggerty, number 1634, Crapo, number 1625, Johnson, number 1633, Budd, 1635, Lee Amendment 1623, Schmidt 1626, Scott Amendment 1645, and Scott motion to refer. Further, that the Senate vote on the above motions and amendments in the order listed, with only the Budd amendments subject to 60 affirmative votes required for adoption. That upon disposition of the Scott motion to refer, the pending amendments and motion be withdrawn, and the Senate vote on the motion to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 4366 as amended, if amended, with 60 affirmative votes required for adoption of the motion to concur, without further intervening action or debate, and with 2 minutes for debate equally divided prior to each vote.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask that the senator modify his request that the cloture motion with respect to the House message be withdrawn, and the only motions and amendments in order to the House message to accompany H.R. 4366 be the following: Lee Amendment number 1623, Schmidt Amendment number 1626, Scott Amendment of 1645, and Scott motion to refer. And further, that the Senate vote on the above motions and amendments in the order listed, with 60 affirmative votes required for adoption, that upon disposition of Scott motion to refer, the pending amendments and motion be withdrawn, and the Senate vote on the motion to concur in the House amendment to the Senate amendment to H.R. 4366 as amended, if amended, with 60 affirmative votes required for adoption of the motion to concur, without further intervening action or debate, and with 2 minutes for debate equally divided prior to each vote.
Is there objection to the modification? And is recognized.
Reserving the right to object because this modification would remove my amendment. We're in the middle of the worst border crisis in U.S. history. The story of this crisis is one of preventable tragedies compounding day after day. And sadly, we've seen it in my home state, North Carolina, less than 2 years ago when Wake County Deputy Sheriff Ned Byrd was killed in the line of duty. He was murdered by illegal aliens who never should have been in this country. I believe that if an illegal alien commits the crime of assaulting a police officer, he or she must be subject to immediate deportation. Any senator who claims to support the police should have no problem supporting my amendment, which would attach the Police Act to this funding package. The Police Act simply states that an alien can be deported for assaulting a police officer, firefighter, or other first responder. The bill has already passed the House, and it can be sent to the President's desk by passing it right now. We've had good faith negotiations on this. We're even willing to have it at a 60-vote threshold. So I would ask that my fellow senators support my amendment. Help remove dangerous individuals before another tragedy strikes. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin is recognized.
Reserving the right to object because this modification also removes my amendment. Mr. President, just the last 5 months, we've seen a string of heinous crimes in which all the suspects are illegal immigrants. In September, a disabled person was brutally raped. In December of 2023, a mother and her 16-year-old son were senselessly killed by a drunk driver. The suspect was an illegal immigrant. A 16-year-old cheerleader was stabbed to death in Edna, Texas. In my state, a 20-year-old nurse was run down by a drunk driver. The suspect was an illegal immigrant. In January, again in my state, a Special Olympian was killed by yet another drunk driver. In Campbell County, Virginia, a 14-year-old girl was sexually assaulted. In February, a 10-year-old boy was slain and hit in a hit-and-run in Midland, Texas. A 2-year-old was gunned down in a gang-related shooting in Maryland. In Kenton, Louisiana, a 14-year-old girl was raped, another individual stabbed by the same illegal immigrant suspect. In Montgomery County, Maryland, an 11-year-old girl was raped. And on February 22nd, Laken Riley was beaten to death while jogging in Athens, Georgia. Now yesterday on the House floor, 170 Democrats, I believe the number was, voted against a bill that simply would have made it law to deport people in this country illegally that have committed crimes. Now, that is just common sense to do that, and yet 170 Democrats voted against that common sense measure. This must stop. My amendment's pretty simple. It's designed to pass on a vote of a mere majority because it's completely germane to what we're talking about. It prohibits federal housing funding from going to sanctuary cities that do not comply with the request from DHS to provide advance notice of the date and time an illegal alien is scheduled to be released from local custody. Just very common sense. Let's force these cities, these declared sanctuary cities, to follow the law and provide notice to DHS. Now, the United States Senate is supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body. Why are we prevented on voting on an amendment that is germane to the piece of legislation on the floor? This is simply so common sense. If the Senate doesn't think it's common sense, if the Senate doesn't believe this is good to force cities to follow the law, to provide notice to DHS of an illegal immigrant being released from custody so that possibly that individual could be deported so they wouldn't be around to rape and pillage and murder, why aren't we allowed to vote? I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, this modification removes my amendment. And my amendment removes a very perverse incentive for illegal immigration and for sanctuary cities. It's very straightforward. My amendment preserves the equal weight of each American citizen's vote because it prevents the use of illegal immigrants coming into sanctuary cities from diluting the votes of American citizens like those in my home state of Tennessee. Therefore, Mr. President, the Senate should be voting on this. It is germane, and therefore I object.
The objection to the modification is heard. Is there an objection to the original request?
I object.
The objection is heard. Senator from Utah is recognized.
Mr. President, just days ago, we saw the text of this legislation in its entirety. We saw that it contained, among other things, more than 600 pages of earmarks, totaling over 6,000 earmarks. It spends a lot of money. It's significant legislation. Whether you love it or hate it, you can't dispute the fact that the legislation does a lot of things in government. It funds a lot of things in government. There are a handful of us who tried to get votes on amendments because, after all, if this is to be put together by one committee of the Senate without other members having the opportunity to offer up amendments and debate it and discuss it, we are neither a deliberative body, certainly not the world's greatest legislative body. But it's hard to even call us a legitimate, authentic legislative body, more than a rubber stamp for the Appropriations Committee, if we're not allowed to offer modifications to what the Appropriations Committee, in its infinite wisdom and glory, decides to put on the floor of the United States Senate. This has always been a distinguishing characteristic of this body. It is different in material respects from the House of Representatives. It's different in that each state is represented equally, allowing each state to be represented as a state. It's also different in that it's a body where we're supposed to allow for open amendment. We've been blocked out of this. We offered up just moments ago 8 Republican amendments. The Democrats countered by saying we'll give you votes on only 4 of them. Now, most of those 4 to which they're objecting to having any votes are themselves germane. Those that are not germane, they're willing to take a vote at 60. And yet they're still not willing to allow us to vote on them, including vote on some things that are very significant and have an enormous impact on the safety, security, and prosperity of the American people. Why? What are they so afraid of? Why are they willing to ignore 2.5 centuries of custom, precedent, and practice? Why are they willing to disregard many more centuries of legislative tradition that goes back to, long prior to the time that we were even a country? Why are they unwilling to do this? And so the reason they're able to do it is because the Senate has resorted time and time again to this procedure known as filling the tree. The majority leader fills the tree, and that's shorthand for he's not going to allow any amendments. And so what I'd like to do is set that aside, to table the tree-filling amendment. And so to that end, Mr. President, I moved to table the pending motion to refer, and I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second?
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss the strong State of the Union thanks to President Biden. And I had the distinct honor of speaking with the President right before and right after his historic State of the Union address last night. President Biden's leadership has created the strongest economy in the world, with almost 15 million new jobs created in this country. He has saved Americans billions of dollars with lower costs of medication, health care insurance, and the removal of junk fees. His actions will cut climate pollution in half by 2030. His focus on infrastructure has created 40,000 projects in 45 American communities. He signed the first major bipartisan gun safety bill in 30 years to protect Americans from gun violence, and he has expanded benefits for military veterans. The list of successes goes on and on. The State of the Union is strong, and under President Biden's leadership, it continues to get stronger.
The gentleman's time has expired.
And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose?